about an assassination. It's going to be fun for you. Okay? So the date is July the 2nd. Okay? And it's 1881. Okay? It's a civil war in the United States has just gotten over. So the election has happened. Okay? After the election, a new government is coming. Okay? And the government's not doing too well. Right? So the president is under a bit of pressure. So it's almost the summer break and the president is walking out with his advisor, okay, and they're walking along the station tracks. So they're going to catch a train and they're going to head off for the holidays. Okay. So the president's walking and suddenly this one person comes out of the crowd, okay, confronts the president who's walking ahead. Okay, so he comes from the back, takes out a gun which has an ivory holster, okay, and shoots at the president. The first bullet just grazes his arm and goes away and everyone's surprised and shocked. He shoots again. This time the bullet enters in near his spinal cord. Okay? It shatters his L1 vertebra. Okay? And the president screams out, and before this guy can shoot some more, he's overpowered. He tries to walk away because there's confusion, everyone surrounds the president. He tries to walk away, but then he's overpowered by the policeman. And so the advisors go to the president and they're really worried. They said, "Are you okay?" The president says, "I'm a dead man." Okay, because he thinks he's going to die. Obviously there's huge uproar. There's an uproar about all this and everyone wants to basically murder that guy. And they start beating him up because he shot the president. And thankfully the president says, "Just go easy on him, just don't kill him." Right? So somehow they manage to get the guy who murdered the president, not murdered him, but he shot him. They take him and they take him to jail. And the president is then taken to the hospital. Now, once he reaches the hospital, there's a very strange tale which comes about after this. So there's a doctor whose name is his name is Dr. Bliss. So Dr. Bliss. That's his actual name. And for the first time, Dr. Bliss has gotten a case which is extremely publicized. So he decides to take full advantage of it. He's not a very good doctor. He's not at all a good doctor. And what makes us think that he's not a good doctor? Because instead of allowing the president's family and friends to meet him, in the first few days he's completely isolated. So this doctor thinks that the president is at risk of developing an infection and dying if he eats anything. So what he does is he decides to feed the president rectally. Okay, so what he does is he makes a broth, a sort of slurry mixture of egg yolk, of whiskey, of opium, okay, because it's a painkiller, and beef broth. And he mixes this all up and he feeds the president rectally for the next 2 months. He tries to find out where exactly that bullet is located. And he takes his fingers and he digs into the hole near the wound and he's trying to find it all over. The president is complaining of severe claw-like pain in his lower back, and that pain is raking down. It's coming down. It's like a claw which is just raking all the way down the back of his legs as well as his genitals. So while the doctor is raking his fingers in and he's just going and trying to find out, like treasure hunt basically, he refuses to listen to other doctors who say, "Okay, why don't you just look near the spinal cord?" You look at the spinal cord because the doctors think that it might be a neurological problem, because when he was shot, the president's legs had collapsed. And even right now, he complains of shooting pains, which are running down the back of his leg. And he's complaining of pains radiating into his genitalia. Dr. Bliss doesn't listen. He keeps sending out updates via the media that the president's going to get better soon, and he's improving. However, the president is not at all improving. One, he's starving because he doesn't get any food. Second, he's depressed because he can't meet anyone. And the third thing, the doctor is just plain incompetent. So this is going on for 2 months. At the end of 2 months, Dr. Bliss says, "Okay, fine, you can go, you can leave." So they transfer the president, they make a special train carriage and they carry him into into a separate area, so his farmhouse sort of thing. and it's been 80 days since his injury. He's lost 80 pounds. So he's extremely weak, he's extremely frail. On the 81st day, he develops a raging fever. And by evening, he dies. Because of the infection caused from all that scrounging around inside his wounds by the unsterilized hands of the doctor, Dr. Weiss. So, as you all can imagine, this creates a huge uproar, and everyone wants to just kill the person who murdered the president. So they hold a trial. And this is where we start discussing the murder. All of this was the build-up to get you all aware of who murdered the President of the United States. This guy has a very interesting background. His name is Charles GUITEAU. What's his name? Charles GUITEAU. So write this down for future reference in case you'll ever want to read up about it, because it's fascinating. He's born the fourth of 6 children. Okay? He's born into a family of little means, so they're not very rich. His mother dies when he was a child. But before she died, she used to lock herself up in her room. She used to shave her head, and she used to loudly chant biblical verses. His father used to abuse him physically. He used to hit him, he used to torture him. His father believed in this cult. Have you ever heard of Osho?
Yeah.
So, you know, they have these cults where the preachers become sort of like a demigod, and they preach a different sort of lifestyle. So the father was interested in one of these preachers. His name was Noyes. Okay, and this was in New York State. And that preacher used to believe in free living. So, multiple relationships. So, there used to be females that used to sleep around with other people, and it was like a free living lifestyle. So the father used to listen to the sermons of this preacher, and obviously the child sort of got involved, and he started believing the same thing. GUITEAU was very bad at school. He never really managed to get anywhere or do anything. However, he somehow managed to pass his bar exam, so he became a lawyer. He left it because he only tried one case, and he scared the jurors so much because he was screaming and spitting on their faces, and he got so aggressive that the jurors basically, he lost the case, in short. So he left that. He moved on and he joined the cult, that thing which his father used to follow. He joined that. But the women out there, the most loving women you can possibly imagine, even they froze him out. They froze him out because one, he looked really strange. This is important. He had a lazy left eye. So one of his eyes did not quite move in sync with the other eye. So the left eye was a little lazy. He had a crooked smile. So when he smiled, it was like only one side of his face is smiling, and the other side just can't keep up. When he spoke, he started like, he used to slur his words a little. He spoke in a high-pitched tone, and used to slur his words. So he did not find the love that he so desired in that community. So he left that. Then he started, he basically started a newspaper. And he took all the ideas of the preacher that he was working, who he was with, and he passed them off as his own. So he plagiarized all his works. He wrote a book, didn't sell. He started a debt collection service. You know what a debt collection service is? People take loans, they don't repay them back. So then these people are hired to go and take the money back. So he started that. It turned out that he used to steal all the money from the clients and not return them to the person who was supposed to return them. So he was wanted under the law. Okay? He was a criminal basically, and people were after him to kill him. So he decided to run. So he ran and he got onto a ship. And when he was sailing on that ship, the ship crashed into another ship. And he survived. And that's when he thought, okay, I'm on this earth for a higher purpose. God saved me because he wanted something from me. He wanted me to carry out his work on this earth. So he left that, and then he went and started to live with his sister. That went off fine, till he got so mad at his sister that he swung an axe at her. His sister was married, she was living with a lawyer. And some altercation happened and he swung an axe at his sister. So obviously she threw him out. So while all of this was going on, he wasn't really going anywhere. He was just moving from place to place, not doing anything with his life. And then the election occurred, and the person he was supporting didn't get the nomination. Okay. And Guiteau obviously thought, okay, there's something wrong here. Right? But then he thought, okay, even if the person I support doesn't become president, it's fine, as long as I get what I want. Okay. So he changes the name on the speech that he's written for the previous person. He changes the name to the new person. And he goes to the new person, the presidential candidate, and he says, okay, I support you, let me make speeches for you, let me win states for you. And he's finally sent off to like a small gathering, and they make him like say a speech in front of like black laborers, and he gets so scared that he just mumbles a few sentences and he walks out. However, the presidential candidate wins that particular state. So obviously Guiteau now thinks that he has delivered the entire state to the president. So once the new president comes in, Guiteau goes to him and he says, okay, I've won this state for you. It was because of me that you have won, you're president. Now I want something in reward. I want to become an ambassador to a foreign country. He wants a posting in Paris because he believes that he has won the state for the president. Obviously, no one listens to him, and finally he gets thrown out of the White House. Now, you have to understand something about the White House then. Anyone could walk in. It was like a public library. You can just walk in and you can just look at the president and talk to him. He was finally thrown out of the White House when he was caught stealing stationery. Yes, that's the truth, unfortunately. So, all this happened. And then one day, God spoke to Guiteau. And God told him, kill the president. And Guiteau thought, yeah, why not? And the reasoning that he sort of had was that if I kill this president, okay, the Republican Party which he supported, which was in turmoil because there were some problems, I told you the presidency wasn't going too well. He thought if he killed the president, the Republican Party would then come back up. And the person he had originally supported would become the president. And then Guiteau would go to him and say, see, I have done this for you. I have killed the previous president because God told me to. So I was just following his word. And now you can set everything right. And then you can send me to Paris as well. This was Guiteau's reasoning. So he decided to go ahead with this plan, and he bought this revolver, again with like an ivory handle. And he thought, okay, he's never shot anyone before. So he goes to like a practice shooting place. And the first shot he takes, he almost falls over because he's never held a rifle before or a gun before. But he keeps practicing. He makes 4 attempts at assassinating the president. On the 4th attempt, he actually kills him. So the first attempt, he decides, okay, maybe not today. The second attempt, he actually goes and he sees the president walking with his wife, and he gets all mushy and he's like, no, I can't kill him. The third time, it's too hot. Okay. So the 4th time he finally managed to shoot him. So this is the case of Guiteau. The trial starts. Okay. Now everyone, the president's just dying. And everyone is waiting for this guy's blood. And his lawyer turns out to be his brother-in-law, whose wife he swung an axe at. Now this lawyer has never handled a criminal case before. He only handles land deals, so like transfer of houses and all those things. And the lawyer is just like, what am I doing here? So he just says this guy's insane. So it was one of the first cases in US history where the insanity plea was used. Like you cannot sentence this man to death because he is insane. He is incapable of discriminating between right and wrong. Guiteau sort of helped him, even though Guiteau said that during the trial he stated that he was not at all insane and that the rest of the people are insane, because it was so obvious that God is the one who's telling him to do all this. He abused the judge, he abused his defense lawyer, he abused the prosecution lawyer, he called the jurors jackasses when they read out his sentence. He was examined by psychiatrists of the state and they refused to believe that he's insane, despite all evidence pointing towards the contrary. There was only one guy who thought this guy is insane. And that guy was one of the most foremost upcoming brain pathologists. His name was Spitzka. He said this guy is completely insane. There is no way that he understands what is right and what is wrong. Spitzka's testimony was disregarded, and this guy was sentenced to death. Now, when he was sentenced to death, he lost it. He just started screaming and shouting. Then he was sent off to jail. And when the date for his execution came, he had written a poem. Okay? And the title of that poem was "I'm Going to the Lodi." And he decided, like, he wanted to sing it out. So he walks on the podium for the execution, I don't know what you call it. And he shakes the hand of the executioner. He's extremely cheerful, he's extremely happy. And he's excited because he's the center of everyone's attention. Right? And he's extremely excited to be there. And he had asked, as his last wish, he wanted the city to provide an orchestra to accompany his song, because he wanted to sing and he wanted it to be a big, nice finale. The city declined, but he still got to say his poem. And he kept breaking down in the middle, and then he got up, and then he was again happy, and then he was cheering, and he waved with the crowds just before going. And then he was hanged. Once he was hanged, his body was taken for an autopsy, and they removed his brain. And Spitzka was the one who was doing the pathology, the autopsy. And everyone thought that, okay, if this guy really has something wrong with him, there must be something wrong with the structure of his brain. When you take out the brain, you'll be like, okay, this is black, this is blue, there's something wrong. Like it's completely flat, or there's something wrong, small degrees in size. Turns out there was nothing wrong with the brain as a whole. When you looked at it, there was nothing wrong. In fact, it weighed a little more than the average brain. And there was just a little flattening of some size, a few folds more, a few less. Nothing major. It's when they cut open the brain and they actually looked inside microscopically that they saw this thing, something seriously wrong here. So every one of us has grey matter and white matter. Okay? What is grey matter? It's when all the cell bodies are accumulated together. Okay? What is white matter? Where all the axons accumulate together. In GUITEAU, the grey matter had thinned to almost nothing in several areas of his brain, especially the frontal lobe, especially the temporal lobes. Okay. In other places, it was thickened. Okay. The brain had little holes in it. It was almost as if someone had taken a normal soft brain and had aerated it. So they put air into it, and that had created small holes everywhere. Okay. And it did not look like a normal brain at all. And anyone who had looked at that brain would have known that there is no way in the world that this person is sane and capable of making any rational decision. Okay. So this was the tale of Charles GUITEAU. We need to understand what was wrong with GUITEAU. And in order to understand what was wrong with him, we need to understand the brain not from a gross perspective, not from individual neuron perspectives, but from a sort of middle ground. How do neurons talk to each other? Okay, and how do they communicate? What goes wrong in someone who is insane, and how is that separate from all of us? So what connects normal to abnormal, and what sort of is the boundary between normal and abnormal? And throughout this course, I'm going to try to sort of make you all aware that there is no clear-cut boundary between normal and abnormal. Okay? There is just what we create. But again, we're going to go back to history. Okay? We're going to understand what people thought of the brain back in the 18th century and the 19th century. So at the start of the 19th century, people were just beginning to accept the cell theory. Does everyone know what the cell theory is? Everyone knows that the body is made up of indivisible pieces called cells. Okay, and those cells come together to form tissues, which come together to form organs, which come together to form systems, which then form the human body. Okay. However, neuroanatomists and neuroscientists refuse to believe this. Can you possibly guess why? Back at that time, they refused to believe that the brain was made up of individual pieces. It was obviously thought that the brain is where the soul resides. Now, if you think of a soul, you think of your soul as individual pieces made up of little things. If you think of your soul like that, you can deconstruct your soul. You can break it up into little pieces. Conversely, if you have little pieces of your soul, you can bring them together to form a soul. And you can change that soul, and you can lose bits of that soul. However, that's not how we think of souls, is it? Right? It's one indivisible whole, and that was the thinking all the way up to mid to late 18th century, 19th century. So in about 1873, everything changed. There was this one guy who changed everything, and the way he changed everything was because of an accident. So now the scene shifts to 1873. Okay? It's an Italian asylum. Now an asylum during that time was not the asylum we think of right now, where people are kept in separate places, they're given stimulating activities. The asylum I'm talking about contained people who were insane, people who were criminals, people who were the lowest of the lowest. Okay? They were all pushed together in cramped small spaces where physical and sexual abuse was rampant. And in the basement of this Italian asylum was a scientist whose name was Golgi, Camillo Golgi. Now, Camillo Golgi was a very strange person because he used to work in the dark in the basement of such a place, and he used to enjoy the work he did. And he used to study slices of different animals' brains. So one day what happened was that Golgi was working, and he was doing his normal work, and he was at the kitchen table. Okay, so it used to be in the kitchen where he used to work because he was cutting open brains and stuff. And he accidentally knocked over a beaker which was full of silver. And that beaker fell onto a group of slides which had owl brains, slices of owl brains. And Golgi lost it because he thought, oh my god, I have spent so much time making those slices and now it's ruined. Okay. Now silver, why did he have silver? Silver was basically used to stain tissues during that time in order to see, okay, these are the cells inside a particular tissue. So he decided, okay, like I've already ruined those, let me just put them aside. A few days later, he notices them, and then he was like, okay, let me take a look at those. Okay, spoiled, I know, but like, let me take a look at those. Puts them under the microscope, and he notices for the first time something amazing. He sees that not every part of the slice has been equally stained. In fact, there have been very, very thin, fine stains which have outlined a particular structure. And that structure was the neuron. For the first time in history, someone had literally seen a neuron, ever. And it had all happened because of an accident. And when Golgi saw this neuron, he realized, okay, the cell theory can apply to the brain as well. So the brain is made up of individual neurons. The drawings that he did during that time were extremely beautiful. So he literally had drawn individual neurons for the first time, which people had never seen before. However, he had slices of the owl brain, and when he used the stain on other pieces, what he did not realize or what he did not get was that these neurons were not arranged in a flat manner. They were not arranged side by side. In fact, they were actually arranged vertically. So what he thought was that he came up with this theory that all neurons form a huge net and they're completely interconnected with each other. Right? And this network was called a reticulum. Okay? So the first theory of neurons is something called a neural reticulum, where all these individual neurons are laid side by side next to each other, and they're all interconnected. So it's not vertical, it's horizontal, it's spread out all over. Okay? He thought that neurons spoke to each other using only their axons, because he saw that the axons used to connect directly to the bodies or to other axons. So his thinking was only axon to axon communication. So this was the state of thinking. Then came the start of the 19th century, and there was another person. He was a budding artist. Okay, his name was Santiago Ramon y Cajal. What's his name? Ramon y Cajal. Now, what was so special about this guy? This guy was a budding artist, And when he was 10 years old, he was sent to like a local painter. And the local painter declared him completely talentless. So his father yanked him out from that school, and he put him into yanked him out from that painting school and put him into a normal school. Cajal did not like that at all, and he was a bit of a rebel. So what he did was he took his he found the neighbor's oil drum. So there was a drum full of oil, and he converted it into a cannon, and he blew up his neighbor's gate. So he was sent to jail for that at the age of about 10 or 11. His father took him out, and then he put him under a butcher. So Cajal literally spent days chopping up meat and animals, and that's when he realized, this is not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. I need to sort my life out. Then he goes back into study, and then he starts studying medicine, and he starts studying anatomy. He likes it. He likes neurosciences. Okay. And then he reads about Golgi, and he reads about neurons, and he realizes, he does those experiments, he uses the silver stain, and he actually sees those neurons, and he's fascinated by them, and he makes the most beautiful paintings of neurons which have ever been made up until that time. His paintings are still available today, and they're kept in museums because they are national treasures of Spain. Anyhow, what he realizes is that there is something which is not quite right about what Golgi thought. He sees that neurons are not arranged side by side, but they're arranged vertically in layers, one below the other. And he finds that in most places in the brain, this layer arrangement is made up of 6 different layers. So there's layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now modern neurology has shown us that these layers perform different functions. So most sensations come in at what layer? Layer number 4. It's the most complicated layer. Okay? They come in at layer number 4. If you want to process the information is sent upwards to layer 2, 3, and 1. Okay? If you want to transfer information down, you want to send it to other areas, the information is passed down to layer number 5 and 6. Okay? So now what people think is that, or the scientists think is that, when you're checking for activity of the brain, when you're checking for individual layers, whenever you find activity in layer 1 and 2, what sort of thing would possibly be going on? Would there be communication going on, or would there be processing going on? It would be process. And when you find activities in layer 5 and 6, what is possibly going on? Communication or activity or function, which is usually going on. What Cajal also found, and this was the revolutionary, is that it is not axon to axon communication which is happening, it's dendrite to cell body to axon, again dendrite, cell body, axon. So he is the one who came up with the DCBA theory. So this was called the neuron doctrine. So what did Cajal come up with? He came up with the neuron doctrine, which is exactly what I told you. Neurons are arranged in layers in the brain, and they communicate from dendrite to cell body to axon. And he basically disproved the whole theory that all the neurons are connected. What Golgi thought was that because it's a network, okay, every single neuron is connected physically, so it's almost merged. It's the same structure as every other neuron in the brain. What Cajal found is that there is a slight, very tiny separation between every neuron from all the between every 2 neurons. So there is no one continuous network. There are now individual neurons which are connected across a small space. This was what Cajal found. And it's surprising because both of these people, Cajal and Golgi, got a Nobel Prize for medicine in 1906. It was the second ever Nobel Prize given out. And both of them got it for their discoveries, and they were both opponents of each other. So they had completely opposite ideas, and they had to receive the Nobel Prize in the same discipline in the same year. And they gave their speeches one after the other. And in their speeches, they weren't exactly humble, and they sort of tried to take down the other person's theories. So it was not a peace prize, that's for sure. Anyway, so that was Cajal and this was this. finally, Cajal's theory took over, and everyone finally realized that it's not one big network, it's individual cells. Okay, there are reasons for that, I don't want to go into that, otherwise this is all we'll be talking about all day. Now, the point comes, if there is a gap between two neurons, okay, how do neurons talk to each other? Because if there is a gap, there is no way that messages can pass from one neuron to the other. Even if the gap is 1/1,000,000th of an inch, there is no way that the message can pass across. Okay, because you need continuity for the message to pass across. Then came the question, is this messenger? There has to be some way for the neuron A to transfer a message to neuron B, and they're separated. This brought about one of the most controversial debates in neuroscience, and that debate was between something called the soups and something called the sparks. Okay, now what is soup and what is spark? So there were two groups of people. Some people believed that there were chemical messengers which were responsible for transferring a message between neuron A and neuron B. These chemicals were together called the soup. Okay, so there's a multitude different chemicals passing different messages from neuron to neuron. So these were the soups. The other group believed in sparks. Sparks was electrical communication, because neurons, every time you put an electrode into a neuron, it shows a change in electrical potential. So the other groups, the sparks, believe that neurons talk via electrical communication. There was huge controversy. Initially, the sparks seemed to have the upper hand, because at that time, alternate current had just started coming in. DC was there, alternate current was there. In fact, every time they stuck a needle or an electrode into the brain, they saw that, okay, there's an electrical spike. So they knew that inside the neuron, there was electrical activity. Okay, now they assume just because the electrical activity is inside, there must also be electrical activity passing across the synapse. So even outside the neuron. Okay, so initially, the sparks had the upper hand. The soups disagreed, because they thought if there is no direct contact, there is no touch between two neurons, how can electricity pass? Electricity doesn't jump. It needs a continuous surface. So that sort of deadlock remained for the next 30 years. Till one very, how do I put this in a nice way, very forgetful scientists decided, okay, there is something which is interesting about these things, and let me start to study them a little more. This was a German scientist, and his name was Otto Loewi. His name was Otto Loewi. Now in 1903, just after Cajal had come up with his paintings and stuff, he put them up and he given them to museums to portray to the general public. So Loewi goes to a museum in London and he sees these beautiful drawings, and he hears about this huge controversy between soups and sparks, and he's wondering, okay, what's going on, like this is amazing, let me study this. And the way they used to study electrical activity or neuron activity was that they used to take a frog brain, so they used to anesthetize the frog, used to cut out its brain, okay, along with the nerves which were surrounding it, and they used to place it in saline or saline, okay. And what they used to do was, every time they used to stimulate those little fibers which are coming out from the frog's heart, the pumping of the heart used to change in frequency. So when they just placed the heart disconnected from everything else into a saline solution, the heart could beat in and of itself without any other stimulation, just putting it in saline. And every time you stimulate different fibers, so if you stimulate one particular fiber, the heart used to contract faster or beat faster. And if you stimulated another fiber, the heart contraction used to slow down.
Without connection.
Without connection. So if you just, while the fibers were anyways connected to the heart, when you're cutting out the heart, they used to cut out the fibers, and the other end of the fiber remains inside. Right? The heart is completely separate. The heart is completely separate. You place it in a saline solution, and it's pumping by itself. So this was what researchers had found till then. And Otto Loewi thought, okay, this is really interesting. Okay, this was in 1903. He went back and he thought, okay, let me study this a little more. And then he was the sort of person who would be sitting and studying and focusing and working on his research, and then he'd be like, okay, this is fine, okay, let me go and visit the orchestra, or let me just go for like a play, or let me go for some art show or something like that. And he used to just leave everything and just walk off. So he was like a very forgetful person that way, happy-go-lucky, he wants to enjoy the finer pleasures of life. And he forgot all about the experiment till 1920, which was 17 years later, when he thought, okay, let me get back to it finally. So during those 20 years, no one knew soups, sparks, no idea. So this guy finally gets back to it in 1920, and it happens in a very strange way. He's sleeping, and he has this dream, and he has this amazing dream where he's come up with like this most insane experiment ever, and he just wakes up and he just scribbles something down and he goes back to sleep, and the next morning he wakes up and he looks at those notes and he realizes he can't understand what he scribbled because his handwriting is messed up, because he was so sleepy when he wrote it that he can't understand. And he spends hours and hours trying to figure out, okay, what is this dot, what is this slang, what does this word mean, and he can't figure it out, and he is distraught. He is absolutely heartbroken because he thought he had really stumbled upon something. And he had, because he was a Nobel Prize winning experiment. But he can't get it. So then he goes back to sleep, and that night again he gets a similar dream. This time, instead of getting up and writing it down, he runs down to this lab, he takes 2 frogs, he anesthetizes them, he removes their heart, quick, all of that, he puts them in 2 separate beakers, and then he does something which no one had thought of doing before. In the first heart, he stimulates one of the fibers, and he notices, okay, the heart's beating faster. Okay. What he does is, he takes a pipette, okay, or a syringe, and he removes the fluid from that beaker. He takes that fluid and he puts it in the other jar. What he notices is that the other heart starts beating faster as well. Okay, there's something going on here which doesn't make sense. How could the water cause the other heart to beat faster? If it's electrical issues, there has to be some electrical communication. There's something going on here. What he does is then, he goes back to the first jar and he stimulates another fiber. And this time the heart beats slow. He again takes the syringe, removes the fluid, again transfers it to the other jar, and he sees, okay, the heart is beating slower as well. That's when he realizes that every time he's stimulating a fiber, there are some chemicals which are coming out, which are changing the contraction of the heart. And those chemicals are diffusing out into the water, and every time he takes that water and transfers it, those chemicals are also transferred. And those chemicals are the ones which are responsible for changing the heart. So in one shot, he basically disproves this spark theory and he proves the soup theory. And he wins the Nobel Prize for this one experiment which takes 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes. Depends on how fast you cut the heart. Okay. Next question. What are these chemicals? Everyone knows that there is one chemical, the acetylcholine, which is the first ever neurotransmitter discovered. Okay? Why was it discovered? Because of this experiment. They realized that, okay, acetylcholine is released at the heart. Okay? If you give acetylcholine, the heart tends to slow down. Okay? So parasympathetic system basically will work. Okay? What about the rest? That's where we get to how research has progressed all the way from back then, 1920, all the way up to now. How do neurons communicate? Now it is known that they communicate via both chemicals and electrical signals. But in humans, communication via electrical signals is very rare. It only occurs in a few neurons. In the animal kingdom, yes, it can occur quite a lot. In humans, majority is by chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. And now we'll talk a little bit about the neurotransmitters. This was just an overview to get you all interested in where we started from and where we are right now. Okay? Take a 2-minute break, freshen up. I think we're sonking out now.